Dean, welcome to the Life Science
Thanks.
Success
Nice to meet you.
Podcast. It's great to have you here and
Thanks,
great to
Don.
have you on the show. It's also great to be here at Bio. So we're currently in San Diego. And so what do you think?
Sort of a home away from home for me.
Oh, really?
It's a
Yeah.
great place. It's a great gathering. A lot of activity. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, great. And so tell me a little bit about yourself and what put you in life sciences.
So I started as a investment banker, merchant banker back in the 80s, and my first IPO was actually a biotech company called Zchem International, and they were involved in synthesizing a drug, an anti-cancer drug called paclitaxel. They were one of only four companies in the world that was able to do that, and Bristol Myers ultimately got the CRADA from the U.S. government, the NCI, and Zchem would eventually be part of the generic market for paclitaxel. Roll the cameras forward many, many years, somehow we're involved in paclitaxel, but only on defending now the peripheral neuropathy that's brought on by paclitaxel.
Oh, wow.
I started with my co-founder at Kannalife back in 2009, 2010, to try to look at the component of cannabis that had some pharmaceutical properties that could be segued. As you well know, Don, a lot of synthetic medicine comes out of nature. It takes the brick wall that nature provides and extends it beyond in making ethical pharmaceuticals. So we first studied CBD back in 2010, and by 2013, after our seed round, we realized that it had some limitations and would have difficulty later on down the road going through the FDA. This is excluding Epidiolex, which is a GW pharmaceutical drug. And we did some medicinal chemistry work to create a new class of compounds that were good neuroprotectants, like CBD had the potential for, but also improve on the pharmaceutical qualities and dose requirements that would be necessary for a synthetic drug. And we now find ourselves $3.3 million in grant money later in IND enabling studies to treat chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy.
And so do you see any sort of reluctance to invest in things like that in a cannabinoid-based drug?
Yes, it's a great question. But last night at an executive breakout, I was speaking with Jim Birchenough, who's the head of global banking for Barclays in the healthcare space. And Jim opened up by saying, I've come from several conferences and you cannot be afraid of pain. Pain is actually an up and coming area target. And there are different compartments of pain. When I was speaking to Jim, well, there's analgesic pain, which we don't want to bother with. That's perfectly apt for the Tylenols, Motrins, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, stuff like that, paracetamol. That's great for analgesic pain, and opioids should never have slid back into that category. So pain is like a yield curve in the bond market. What you're buying in that space, is addressable, right? So when you look at opioids for palliative care, that's going to be your best. But what captures other components of pain, like nociception, or in our case, peripheral neuropathy, which is a form of pain? It's not pain as everybody seems to know it. But there's really been no answer for peripheral neuropathy, and that's why diabetic patients suffer from. That's where chemotherapy patients who are in refractory cancer have to take a paclitaxel or a platinum-based therapy. That causes this incredible neuropathy, this pins and needles pain. And so you can't be afraid of it, is what Jim said, because years ago he was involved with Amlian, and Amlian had a gluconatide, and they had a GLP-1, and everybody shorted them on Wall Street, but nobody's shorting GLP-1s anymore.
Right.
So he made that point very, very clear that you cannot be afraid to compartmentalize and look at, where the aptitude is in the treatment of pain. And in our case, it's peripheral neuropathy.
So, I mean, it's such an important point, especially I think at the start of the podcast here, just to just openly address as well. And I also think it's important that we just discuss, like, hey, there's a foundational reason why you should go down this path and sort of explain these these areas of the drug. So yeah.
Sure, you brought up another point, cannabinoid. Why is that a dirty word? It shouldn't be a dirty word. However, it's not the composition of the drug that identifies who you are, because our drug is a resorcinol derivative and it's a 1,3-benzene diol based on classification and by patent. However, the target that we're hitting is a G protein coupled receptor that has been branded an orphan putative cannabinoid receptor. So you look at Arena Pharmaceuticals. A couple of years ago, Pfizer bought Arena, And everywhere from Benzinga to any cannabis publication was saying, oh, Pfizer's in the cannabis game. But they weren't, because Arena's drug that was focused on CB2 as a receptor made that drug a cannabinoid-based drug. It's because the target is a cannabinoid. In our case, we have no affinity at CB1 or CB2, but we do have target efficiency at GPR55, and GPCRs are about 40% of the small molecule market in drug discovery.
So I mean, the one thing that's amazing to me hearing you talk though too is you started out as an investment banker.
Right.
So there's a lot of dialogue here that I'm sure you've had to one educate yourself in, but also hey, there's an awful lot of interactions that you're having to learn as well. I'm just amazed at at your abilities to sort of translate things as well, both from the investment side as well as from the drug side, especially given the current environment that we're in. Most people are having so many challenges just getting investments as well.
Yeah, you have to look at the market. And I've spoken with, again, Jim last night, and he's talking about this market being a coiled spring. That's a term of art in the investment banking community. I agree with that. It is a coiled spring, but for different reasons. I think that the market ahead this year, in general, the broad market is going to have some challenges. But typically, what happens in a trough or a pullback, biotech and healthcare are the leaders that take economic growth and challenges in the stock market out of the doldrums. In this particular case, the last 3-year washout that took place in biotech, if you look at the divergence between the S&P 500, which was up 23.5% over the 3 years, versus the biotech index, the XBI, which was down 5%, you now realize that there's an inverse relationship. It's sometimes sectors wash out, and that's what happened. There were overvaluations brought on by the hype associated with vaccines and COVID. So the post-COVID euphoria that took place in healthcare caused a treasure trove of overvaluations in asset classes that were very, very risky to already classes that were developed or in the clinic. Mm-hmm. In this particular case, I think we're going to be coming out of it very, very shortly. So I think there's a real good opportunity here in some of the sectors, especially neuro, pain, different cancer cell therapies like radiopharmaceuticals are going to be strong. But I think we're in the right place in pain and inflammation at this point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And so just to talk a little bit about Kannalife and what it is that you're working on and, where you're currently at.
Great. Thanks for the question. I appreciate that. Again, I focus on the differences in the terminologies that are being used. Some companies thought that platform was a good use of terminology, and it seemed to have gotten a lot of attention in the past. We have a drug that sits on top of a platform disorder called inflammation. And we peel back the onion skin and found out in our work that we've done over the years that our drug is a neuroprotectant. We studied it in a preclinical model for overt hepatic encephalopathy, but we couldn't track funding on that to the NIH back in 2016. So we were pivoted by Temple University to look at chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, another neurotoxic event that causes inflammation in the body. And slowly but surely, we saw what our mechanism of action was. We have neuroprotection at NCX1, which is sodium calcium regulator in the mitochondria, and also in tamping down a pro-inflammatory response of GPR55, which is a G protein coupled receptor I spoke about a little earlier. Both are in the mitochondria, both are in synaptic neurons, both are evident in the process that takes place with neurotoxicity and paclitaxel, and it's in the periphery, but the periphery speaks to the central nervous system as well. That's where we have neuroprotection that we've seen in breaking the blood-brain barrier. So that may give us an opportunity to segue out of chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy once we're in the clinic to other disease indications, like maybe a neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's, maybe a process associated with opiate use disorder. These are things that we started to see with our drug's involvement under the umbrella of inflammation that opened up other opportunities. So we have a single asset, but the single asset is on a platform disease or disorder state called inflammation that could lead to other disease indications for us.
That's wonderful. And so what stage are you in currently?
IND enabling. We're finishing up animal tox this year. We have an IND briefing book that's ready to go to the FDA. We're hoping to get a pre-IND meeting with them sometime in September of this year and hopefully open up the clinic first in human sometime in the third or fourth quarter of 2025.
Great. And so, in terms of what you hope to get out of bio, so while you're here, what do you hope for most?
Partnering.
Yeah. Yeah. And what does partnering look like for a company like Kannalife?
I think that there's a universe of participants that are out there right now that are actively looking for different reasons for novel therapeutics. And it's not your top 10 biotech companies. You could find yourself partnering with mid-tier biotech and things that you never thought in your wildest dreams have market potential with the use of your asset. Sometimes other people look at you and say, I have an idea for you. And we're seeing that and we're getting that here. And it's really an interesting and wonderful experience.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit more, eye-opening as well, I guess, because you got other minds to kind of probe while you're here in terms of partnering. That's what I hear you saying as well.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
seeing that.
So, Dean, thanks a lot for coming on the Life Science Success Podcast. I really appreciate you being here, and it was great to get to talk to you about Kannalife.
Thanks. I'll see you in Denver.